Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to rank every single book that I read in the past month in April from best to worst. So let's just dive right into it. My first book, as always, is written by J.R.R. Tolkien, if you haven't guessed already. It is Sauron Defeated. This is the 9th volume in the History of Middle-earth series out of 12. If you're unfamiliar with the History of Middle-earth series, after J.R.R. Tolkien died, he left behind a bunch of manuscripts and papers that his son Christopher found and edited and ended up publishing, and those books became like the Silmarillion and the Children of Húrin and Unfinished Tales and all those other ones. And one of them was the History of Middle-earth series, a 12-volume series which chronicles how Christopher's father, J.R.R. Tolkien, developed Middle-earth, how he wrote it. So it has earlier drafts of the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, as well as a couple other previously unpublished works. So this 9th volume, the first quarter of it was the history of how, so it has earlier drafts of the Lord of the Rings from the Tower of Cirith Ungol all the way up until the end of the book. And there is like an abandoned epilogue that Tolkien originally had in mind for the Lord of the Rings that he wrote, and really a fantastic epilogue. It has like Sam telling his children the story of how he and Frodo went to Mordor, and it ends with him hearing the waves of the sea. So a really great epilogue, but I can sort of see why Tolkien left it out of the Lord of the Rings when it was eventually published. And then the thing that makes up the bulk of the book is the Notion Club papers. These are... So the Notion Club is a fictionary club based on a real-life club called the Inklings, which were a literary group that met in Oxford in a pub that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were a part of, and they read their works aloud to each other and critiqued each other's works. And so the Notion Club is loosely based on the Inklings, and all the characters are based on the different members of the Inklings Club. And the word Notion is also based on the word Inklings because, like, you know, Inklings, dabblers in ink, and an Inkling is also an idea or a notion. And so these papers, these Notion Club papers, with some really fascinating stuff. It's basically just this one member of the Notion Club is having strange visions of a faraway place called Numenor, or Atlantis, and he's learning the Adunaic language which the men of Numenor spoke. And so the Notion Club papers were really fascinating. They're just talking about philosophical stuff, linguistic stuff, and so they were really fascinating so far as they went, but Tolkien did end up abandoning them because he had to finish The Lord of the Rings. He had been writing it for like 15 years at this point, and he eventually finished it 2 years later. But it's really sad that he abandoned the Notion Club papers because they were very, very fascinating. They basically take place in the future in 1987, which at the time was the future, you know, now it's the past, it's in the past. But the Notion Club papers were very fascinating, and I think the Notion Club papers is probably my most favorite part of the History of Middle-earth series so far, thus making this book my favorite volume in the History of Middle-earth series so far. I only have 3 more volumes to go, as there is 12 books in the History of Middle-earth. But then there is the next quarter of the book about is the drowning of Anadune. And Anadune is another name for Numenor, and this is just Tolkien writing earlier drafts of the story of the island kingdom of Numenor, which is where Aragorn's ancestors in The Lord of the Rings were. I'm sure you've heard it mentioned in The Lord of the Rings if you've read it. So the drowning of Anadune was very fascinating. It also had a lot of information on the Adunaic language, which was a language that Tolkien created for the men of Numenor to speak, in addition to Elvish, Dwarvish, and Black speech. Tolkien was a linguist indeed. This was a fantastic book, absolutely incredible, my favorite volume of the History of Middle-earth series so far, and I would give it a 10 out of 10. I did a video where I did like a book review of this book, like a full review of it, so if you are interested in that, then I will leave a link in the description for that review if you're interested in seeing that. It is Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. So this story is basically about a man called Elwyn Ransom who ends up getting abducted by his former friends and brought to the planet Mars in a spaceship. And there he finds out more about Mars and about its inhabitants. And the inhabitants of Mars are actually intelligent creatures. They have an entire language of their own. So he's like learning their language, and he's learning other stuff about the planets as well, and learning these creatures' language, these aliens' language. This was a really fascinating book, absolutely fantastic. It also had bits of theology sprinkled throughout, which really probes deep thinking, but were not very hard to understand at all. So, I really highly recommend this book. I think this is my favorite C.S. Lewis book so far, and it is the first book in a trilogy. This book is probably better than the Narnia books, all of them put together, which is what C.S. Lewis was most known for, and I would definitely recommend this book. It's fantastic. You should definitely read it. 10 out of 10, for sure. I also reviewed the next book on this list, so if you're interested in that, I will leave a link in the description down below. The Secret Cave. This is a pretty short book. It is only 80 pages. It smells fantastic too. This is a very old and battered copy that I have. I really love old books, especially the smell of them. But this story is historical fiction, so it's taking place during World War II, and it's about a bunch of classmates in school, a bunch of children, and it is their duty to protect 20 Jewish children from the Nazis in their school. In short, this was a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. I had one minor, what would you call it, gripe, I suppose, at the end of the book. Very, very, very minor complaints about the end of the book, but that's a spoiler, so I won't say it now. And I did do a full review of this book, but I would definitely recommend this book. That one small complaint did not ruin the book for me. It was still a great ending and a great book, and I would definitely recommend it. 9 out of 10. The next book is another C.S. Lewis one. It is Surprised by Joy. Now, this is mostly a theological book, but it is essentially C.S. Lewis's autobiography documenting his early life up until when he was like 25 years old, which is when he became a Christian. And this is the story of how C.S. Lewis came to accept Christianity. C.S. Lewis was an atheist before he met Tolkien, and Tolkien was a Christian, so he convinced C.S. Lewis to accept Christianity, and C.S. Lewis went on to write a whole bunch of fantastic theological works, and also the Narnia books, which have a lot of things that point towards elements in Christianity as well. To put it shortly, this was a great book, really fascinating. The theology was fantastic, as it always is with C.S. Lewis, of course. It is a bit hard to understand, and a lot of the sentences you have to read over like several times to really grasp what C.S. Lewis is trying to tell you. But that's part of the reason why I like this book so much, is it forces you to think way deeper. It definitely forced me to think way deeper, and I would definitely recommend this book. C.S. Lewis said in this book, he has a fantastic way of communicating his feelings and emotions during those times, using analogies that are very easy to understand, but that also probe deeper thinking. And I really love this book. And C.S. Lewis said that he was the most reluctant convert in all of England, which just goes to show that God can change the hearts of even the most stubborn people. Like, he can change the heart of the most reluctant convert in all the world to accept Christianity and accept that God is real. This was a fantastic book. I definitely recommend it. It is essentially C.S. Lewis's autobiography about his early life, but also has a lot of theology, and I would definitely recommend it. I'll give it 9 out of 10. The next book is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by J.K. Rowling. The author of Harry Potter. This does take place in the Harry Potter universe. This book is actually mentioned a lot in the Harry Potter books, in like the main 7 Harry Potter books that I have right here. And this is about all the magical beasts that the Muggles do not know about, or at least that they don't know about now. And there's like you know, all the basic ones. There's like unicorns, pixies, dragons, and all that. Centaurs, mermaids. But then it also has a ton of creatures that, as far as I know, J.K. Rowling made up, and some really interesting creatures as well. Like there's this one, I forget what it's called, but it's like a fire serpent, and if you leave a magical fire, such as, you know, like flue powder, out too long, then from its coals will rise the fire serpent. And the fire serpent crumbles into dust in just 24 hours, but it does lay eggs all over your house, and if they hatch, your house is doomed. It will burn. So you gotta destroy the eggs, exterminate them before they can hatch. And so, yeah, there were some really interesting creatures in here that, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, J.K. Rowling made up. I do have one very, very minor complaint about this book is some of the creatures, it wasn't being very clear on their appearances. Like, it would just summarize how they looked in 5 words or so, like, big horns, scales, legs, claws. It would, like, some creatures, I had a very clear picture of what they were. You mean, like, I know, like, obviously, dragons and, trolls and unicorns and all that, we can all picture those. But then there were the other ones that, like, J.K. Rowling made up that I feel like I needed more of a description of to really understand. And so this book would have been better, I feel like, if J.K. Rowling had been a bit more clear on some of these creatures' appearances, or if there were more illustrations in it. Which there were a lot of illustrations, but I want illustrations of every single creature to, like, understand their appearances, because I didn't really get a whole lot of that from this book. All the same, though, a really fascinating read, and I will give it an 8 out of 10. The next book, I technically didn't read it in April, but I did finish it in April. It is The Bronze Bow by Elizabeth George Spear. This is basically historical fiction, taking place in the 1st century A.D. in Jerusalem at the time that Jesus was teaching there. And we have a teenager named Daniel, whose parents were killed at the hands of the Romans, and so he is blinded with revenge at the Romans. But then Jesus teaches him that love your enemies as yourself, repay evil with goodness. And this was a really, really great book. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'll give it an 8 out of 10. I can't think of much to say about it, honestly, but it was a great book, and I would definitely recommend it. The reason I don't rank it higher on this list is just because I feel like I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did, Fantastic Beasts, and Surprised by Joy, and Out of the Silent Planet, and Sauron Defeated. And there might have been one other. Was there? I don't think there was. This book was not bad, it just wasn't as good as the higher books on this list, so I'll give it an 8 out of 10 as well. I also did do a full review on this book, so if you do want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on it, you can check that out. I'll leave a link in the description down below to that. It is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I have heard so much about these books. This is basically young adult fiction. It's sort of fantasy, science fiction, and romance all mingled together. The concept is strange. So, basically, this book is about a bunch of kids who are chosen at random to go into an arena and fight each other to the death for everyone's entertainment. How delightful, I know. I went into this book a little bit hesitant because the concept sounded very, frankly, awful. I feel like I did enjoy it, like, more than I thought I would. And I would say it's a pretty good book, but not a fantastic book. I did enjoy the story, and it was definitely a very entertaining book, but I don't feel like it provided me with anything other than that entertainment. I don't feel like there's really anything that we can learn from this book, and that it was just written for entertainment. It was definitely entertaining, and I flew through it, and I got way too attached to all the characters, but I feel like it didn't really do anything for me beyond entertaining me. And the one thing that I really did not like about this book is the writing style. The writing style was very simplistic, like, too simplistic. It was not the best, and I feel like the author really could have put much more thought and effort and editing. There definitely could have been better word choice, and the sentences, some sentences just felt off, and the overall structure of the writing style just didn't land with me. So this book, frankly, wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't terrible either. The writing style I'd probably give like a 4 out of 10. I did enjoy the overall story somewhat, but it did nothing for me beyond leaving me very entertained. Overall, I'd give this book maybe a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but it's not the worst book. But keep in mind, it's not the best book either. The next book is actually the second book in that series. I think it's a trilogy, and then there's like 2 more books that are prequels to it. But it is Catching Fire. This book I definitely didn't enjoy as much as the first book. I still did enjoy the overall story, but it did drag a bit, especially in the first half of the book, and the writing style did not improve at all. And again, this book didn't do anything for me beyond leaving me very entertained. I will definitely keep on reading this series, and will definitely read all these books because, you know, like, they're fun, they're entertaining, and you can fly through them. But I still feel like it did nothing for me, and I do not like the writing style that much. I'd probably give this one a 6 out of 10. So those were all the books that I read this past month. I do want to mention one book that I said I was going to read this month, and I didn't even get like a quarter of the way through it. This thing is unfortunately losing its dust jacket. This includes Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey, some Greek poetry that was translated into English. So I got like 5 chapters into the Iliad, and I just stopped, because I feel like it was sort of pushing me into a reading slump. Now, this book was by no means a terrible book at all. I would go so far as to say it was a good book, or at least the first 2 chapters were. Now, first of all, this translation was weird. Like, a lot of the sentences just felt very off, and the word choice definitely could have been better. Like, there was one sentence that literally said, "They ran into the pell-mell." Like, you don't think there could have been a better word choice to replace pell-mell? Maybe I just need a better translation of this book, and I do definitely want to end up finishing it someday, as well as reading the Odyssey. I will definitely read more of the Iliad this month, but I'm not promising that I will finish it, and maybe I just need to find a better translation. But then chapters 3 to 5 were just like, so there was this battle that was mentioned at the end of chapter 2, and then chapters 3 to 5, and maybe beyond, I don't know, I didn't read beyond them, but chapters 3 to 5 were just literally telling how basically every single soldier in that battle was killed, and then it goes off into all their family history and their family trees and their killer's family history. So, like, it was like, this guy with the really, really long name from this place with the really, really long name killed this guy with a really, really long name from this random place with a long name that I've never heard of before. And he killed him by impaling him with a spear, hanging him onto a wall, but then that wall was crushed and then fell into an inferno. Thus did that guy die. Now, this guy is the son of this guy who married this person, and their ancestor did this, whose brother did this, and his aunt's name was this, his great-great-uncle's name was this. And then it would be like, and then the killer's one of the killer's family members did this random thing in another battle, and his name was whatever, and he had a sister who did this, and then their great-uncles did this. I'm kind of ranting here, so I should probably stop. But that was basically all that chapters 3 to 5 were. And I do desperately want to read both the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I will definitely read more than this month, but I'm not promising that I will finish them, and I probably just need to find a better translation. So, those were all the books that I read in this past month, in April. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please hit the like button, And please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because I do lots of book reviews and basically anything else related to books. You know, like at the end of every month, I do this where I rank every single book that I read in the past month. So please subscribe if you want that. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. And for now, farewell.